Hello and welcome to today's Canadian Community Roundtable, sponsored by the Retail Solutions Providers Association. Our topic today is adaptive sales, how VARs and ISVs can effectively communicate with merchants in the new normal. I'm Jim Roddy, the Vice President of Sales and Marketing for the RSPA. So glad to that you joined us today. A little bit of background on the RSPA for folks who are attending this roundtable who aren't a member, or for those folks who are listening on demand through our YouTube channel. So the RSPA is North America's largest community of VARs, software developers, vendors, and distributors in a few markets: retail, restaurant, and grocery. And we're a fit for any organization that's serious about growth in those markets. VARs tend to join us for our guidance from the general counsel that we have on staff, from fellow community members, and also through the education of the RSPA Academy. ISVs, a lot of them join us to develop strategic relationships with community members who can help expand their reach. And vendors and distributors join because, quite simply, they need to be where the growth-oriented VARs and ISVs congregate. And many of our members have been part of the group for decades, and we frequently add new startup tech companies because we accelerate their growth and they see the massive ROI that RSPA membership offers. We've had a strong presence in Canada for many years, and we thank everybody who's been a longtime Canadian member joining on this call, and we welcome the new folks who will join us today. If you are curious about joining the RSPA or joining the RSPA Canadian community, see the email on your screen there, membership@gorspa.org. That'll put you in touch with Member Services Manager Ashley Nagy, and she'll be happy to answer any questions that you have. So again, a lot of great things about the RSPA, but we figure you want to not just hear from us, you want to hear from our members in terms of how the RSPA impacts them. So let's share a few quick success stories with you. This one is from Sean Buckley, in charge of retail partnerships at Shopify. And you can see about how the RSPA has been a key, for him in terms of individual growth and also impacting the growth for his company in the market. We also have Andrea Roberts. She's the president of VAR Teletech Systems. Just like Sean, she's located in the Toronto area, and she says how being part of an international organization has aided our business staying in the know of the latest trends and how to adapt. We also have a testimonial here from Tim Shane. So Tim is based out of BC in Western Canada, and he talks about how the RSPA provides the vehicle, the venues, and the network to allow you to achieve growth. And we hear this from a lot of our members: you won't feel alone in the sea of small IT businesses. And I can say, being a former business owner for 5.5 years, I know how difficult that is, where you really feel like you're alone. The RSPA gives you an opportunity to lean on our community. And then another success story, Paul Leduc from Globe POS Systems in Brampton. It says the RSPA community is a support group at many levels. The support and the knowledge are priceless. So again, that's a few quick success stories, and we'll share with you some of the benefits that we offer to the RSPA as well. And I'll turn it over for a minute to highlight a few of them to the aforementioned Ashley Nagy. Ashley, welcome to the Roundtable.
Thanks, Jim. Good to be here. As Jim mentioned, we have several benefits available, and I wanted to take a moment to highlight a few. The first that I'll start with is the RSPA Academy education. So we have a tremendous amount of education content that is available to our members throughout the year, online, on demand. We just launched 20-plus educational sessions that we hosted a few weeks ago during our RSPA Education Symposium. So a variety of educational topics there, including sales and security and business growth, and much more. We also have our VAR and ISV advisory services, so working one-on-one with our team to tackle issues or opportunities within your own business, whether it be messaging to your customers or partnerships and things like that. So those are a few of the things that we can work on with you there. We also have our legal advisor hotline with Jill Miller, RSPA attorney. So whether it's a question or maybe a contract that you're looking for, Jill is available via phone and email, and it's unlimited and all a part of your membership, so no additional charges there. We also have our security advisor hotline with Nathan Sweeney. Nathan is available for any security-related questions that you might have, or those what-if scenarios should an incident occur. And then we have our UPS shipping discount, which also applies to our members in Canada. So really robust shipping discounts there. And then last but not least, I'll touch on our RSPA member directory. So the power of connections within the RSPA community is something that we hear often, and we do a lot in the way of warm introductions. But having that RSPA member directory of that, sea of business owners that really can help provide advice in your business is something else that would be available to you. Next up, I'd like to touch on the Rogers for Business benefit. That's exclusive preferred pricing for our RSPA members, whether it's data plans, voice plans, or 4G data SIM cards. That too is available with special RSPA member pricing. And then last but not least, our RSPA Solution Center that we launched a few months back. This is our online platform where each of our vendor and ISV members have their own Solution Center hub pages to be able to share with you their products and services that are available. So this is a great opportunity to connect if you're a VAR and you're looking for a new solution partner, or if you're a vendor or an ISV and you'd like to host your solutions here, we'd be happy to help you with those as well.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Ashley. And all those services are available to Canadian reseller members for right around $1 a day. And the reason it's so low is because of our sponsors. And so we want to thank our Canadian community sponsors who are making this roundtable and making the RSPA Canadian community possible. So thank you very much to Blue Star, Payment Tree, Star Micronics, Global Payments, PartnerTech, Touch Dynamic, and ScanSource. Again, thank you very much to our Canadian sponsors for making all of this possible. And before we get rocking and rolling, let me turn it over to a minute to RSPA CEO John Kirk. John, if you could please have a word for our attendees today. Welcome, John.
Thank you, Jim. And guys, thanks for joining. We appreciate it. We're excited about Canada. We got a big opportunity up there. And I just want to reinforce some acknowledgement for a couple of folks. And you guys know that Paul LeDuc has been a great leader for us, a great community leader. Paul is a CEO of Globe POS, and he's one of the best cheerleaders and best, I would say, best examples we have in the community, a driving community. And we've got Paul up there, and he does just a super job, and he's a big reason why we're having the event we're having today. So Paul's done a great job, and it's great to have someone like Paul that leads the charge. But we've also got Michelle, who is now a board member for the RSPA. Now, Michelle, most of you know Michelle. He's the president of Blue Star Canada. He's not able to be on this call, but we're so excited that he is one of 2 vendor board members recently elected. And we're just excited about that, because I will tell you, as a CEO of the RSPA, Blue Star has been one of the most supportive resources we've had on many fronts. And I don't mean just being always willing to consider sponsoring an event and leading the charge, but they've been a great sounding board. Mark Fraker was the first chairman that I worked with at the RSPA, and he's a Blue Star marketing VP, and he's always been a tremendous resource for us just to bounce an idea off of. He's helped us close the gap on market information. You couldn't ask for a more cooperative member that ultimately affects all of our members, because as we get support from our members, we're able to support the community that much better. So we're excited to have Michelle in the mix, and we just think we've got a couple of bookends up there with Paul and Michelle, and some tremendous momentum in Canada. So just want you to know how excited we are about a day like today, and appreciate you participating. And just always remember, if it's important to you, it's important to us. And we're trying to get better as we reinvent ourselves where appropriate and get to the next level. So thank you for joining. We're excited about the future, and today's a great way to start that process. And we're so happy Marty's joining this call. So with that, Jim, I'll turn it back over to you and just thank everybody for their participation.
Great. Thank you, John. And again, after our guest speaker, this will be an open forum information sharing discussion. But let's turn the program over to our special guest speaker, Marty Park. Marty, welcome to the RSPA Canadian Community Roundtable. Take it away.
Jim, thanks so much. It's great to be here, and thanks for the opportunity to talk to everybody today. I really want to focus on adaptive sales. I think 2020 has pointed out that adapting our sales process has never been more important, and figuring out new ways to be able to connect with people authentically and effectively. And I think those are two words that I really use regularly: authentic, effective, adaptive. I wanted to touch my background. I started my first business at the age of 21. Conveniently, it was a software company. We built IVR systems, interactive voice response technology, which today is pretty old school as voicemail technology, but 28 years ago, it was pretty inventive. And I was in the software business for a decade, sold my software company, went to work in a couple of other businesses all the way through the 90s. So I have a good understanding of this space. I have owned 13 different companies in 7 different industries. And so my diversity is in marketing and advertising, restaurants, franchises, software, audio production, a variety of different things. A lot of my business or my role within each one of those companies, and really my love of things, is around sales and marketing. And so that's right up my alley today with our discussion. I've had some good success through my career representing Canada at the G20 Summit on Entrepreneurship globally, being a top 40 under 40 in my hometown city, and lots of opportunities to just represent entrepreneurship globally. I did the math, and I've sold about 18 products since the age of 16, and I'm from a long line of proud salespeople. My grandfather sold cars for 27 years, so while most people have a negative car salesman stereotype, I have a fantastic one, and my dad is also just somebody I've learned so much from sales. Last year, I became an Amazon best-selling author. I wrote a book called Tiger by the Tail, 99 Secrets to Tame and Master Your Business. And there's a whole section on there in selling, section on marketing, but really all of the 99 ideas that over the last 28 years as an entrepreneur that I could share with the business owners, but also has a lot of impact for sales professionals, sales managers, and management across the board. I want to look at, I think this is how 2020 is for a lot of businesses, where what was working before wasn't necessarily working now. There's just been so much disruption in the marketplace that it's caused a lot of people to rethink how they approach selling and connecting with their end user customers. And so I want to touch on COVID. And I know that depending on what province you're in, what state you're in, even down to what city, the impact and attitude of this is a little bit different. But what I found is across the overall marketplace, and I say that in terms of North America, Canada, the US, even into Europe, traditionally we've gone at it from the perspective of, and certainly this is, I think, really, really relevant in the software space, we're so driven by features and functionality of our product, oftentimes selling that, presenting the benefits of it, which is old school, features and benefits, but really trying to establish for clients, here's the value that we're trying to bring. And then finally getting into the discussion of, okay, what's the return on investment? In good markets, features and functionality and the value in day-to-day end user businesses becomes the issue. And sometimes ROI is a little bit further down the path. And this obviously changes a little bit depending on where you are as a member, and where you are in the food chain or in the market. Well, here's what I found is after selling, or selling after COVID and into 2020, there's a real switch where, just like in retail, you see it in restaurants, you see it in different things, there's a real safety factor. And so what it is safety actually now affects not necessarily your end product. It's not like suddenly I install software and because of COVID, there's a problem with it. But what we get is safety in that maybe I don't want to have a meeting. Maybe I'd rather do this over Zoom. And so the safety factor is changing our sales process. The next thing that I'm having to do is establish more trust. As I'm doing maybe less business, I have more time, and certainly through the springtime with people being on lockdown, they had way more time to be able to say, okay, do I trust this person? Do I know this person? And relationships skyrocketed in terms of value. There's been a big switch of ROI, where now as I make purchases and people are concerned about cash flow, the return on investment for anything they're buying has jumped and trumped the value of the product. The day-to-day value, that even though it might provide value right as I install it or get things kicked off, I'm looking at the ROI ahead of that. And so the big thing here is risk, right? A lot of risk management. People overall are more cautious and want reassurance. Now, the exception to this is if you're what I call retail therapy, where if it's something, it's a small purchase, it's something I can go on Amazon and buy right away, that those types of marketplaces are still rocking and rolling. But as soon as I get into larger purchase ticket items, whether it's in the B2B space or in the B2C space, all of this has really turned over. And so I'd go back and say, hey, with your team, how are we addressing this new model and how are we going about doing it? I use these images where traditionally I think where anybody who's able to approach sales is able to take this approach of, and you can appreciate, this is my favorite used car salesman, but that element of like, if I knock on enough doors and I'm in the marketplace, I can sell something. I like the idea that now you have to take the approach of a little bit more like Oprah Winfrey. Even though Oprah actually represents all sorts of different products, most people associate the ideas of care, kindness, value. She's moving from a place of how do I help first? And so that's really what I want to do is in my sales process with my sales team. In fact, my whole organization, I want to look and say, okay, into 2020, the fall season and into 2021, how are we moving in the marketplace to demonstrate our willingness to help first? Now, transitioning from that, I'm a huge advocate that there needs to be sales every single day. And what I mean by that is sales can't be something that gets looked at once a month or once a week. Sales is a daily activity in terms of actual activity and monitoring. And so I'm tracking my sales process, and the progress should be really, really clear, not only to me as an owner or to a manager, but individual salespeople. It's shocking to me that when I meet with anybody in a sales group and ask them how their sales are progressing for a month, oftentimes they go, I think it's on track. They, in fact, often don't know enough about getting feedback. They don't know who's actually ordered for the month. They don't have the information readily at their fingertips, and they're not responsible for tracking their own performance. And so I like the idea that tracking of sales now needs to be something throughout the organization, from the sales group through the, if you've got an inside sales group, through management, but everybody's looking at it. Breaking it down to daily, weekly, monthly goals. There's all sorts of people that have a monthly goal. Again, 2/3 into the month, they really don't know if they're ahead because they've never broken it down into those micro steps. I was dealing with a company where the average salesperson needed to do 5 deals a month. And when we broke it down to present that it averaged out to be 5 to hit their numbers, half the group was shocked. And so I think it goes back to really understanding the micro achievements and micro success that we need to be sharing in 2020 to ensure that our sales approach is a little bit different. I love the idea that sales needs to be a team discussion. The reason for this is that because it's more challenging to get in front of people today, you not only need to know the goals of things, but what's happening is salespeople and staff alike are saying, well, I know what the goal is now, but I'm struggling on how to achieve that. How do I get in front of people? How do I engage people? I don't know what these new tools are. What tactics should I be employing? How do I change my conversation? That's something that needs to be an ongoing discussion. And really should be, the traditional sales meeting of let's go around the table and talk about who, where your leads are at. Really needs to become a strategic and tactical discussion ongoing about what we need to do about sales and how we need to improve it every day. A couple of the things I think becomes important is celebrating sales. When you do get a win, being able to celebrate that and creating a bit of a culture of, hey, sales is something we embrace. Sales is something everybody participates in. Sales is something that we look at all the time, and we celebrate that so that people understand that there's a positive connotation to sales and a responsibility we all have as an organization, no matter what place you are. And I say involves everybody. And I can think of some examples where the receptionist is oftentimes somebody who is talking to people all the time. Does she know how to represent your company, your product? Can she talk about the functionality of it, the value or the benefits of it? The inside sales group oftentimes used to taking orders, but do they have the ability now to transition to going and reaching out to the marketplace? Great. On the service desk the other day, I was just dealing with an airline. And although I was dealing with a service person, they were able to transition things and talk about sales in a really easy transition. And I thought there's been some training here for somebody who's not normally in this sales group, who's now being tasked with that functionality in this new marketplace. I think what we're seeing is there was sort of business as usual. There's been a giant chasm that we've had to leap over the last 6 months. And now there's signs in economies that things are returning to a little bit of a normal. And maybe that normal is sort of 80% of what it is before. But I think we've got to get our team back on track to be able to reset things at a high level. And what I mean by that is renewing the sales goals. I actually have a client in January of this year who said, we want to do 3.6 million in sales. as COVID and we got into March and April, their goal for the year became zero. It really became focused on, I got to stay alive. We've just got to abandon everything we had for plans. They really were in a bit of a leadership tailspin. And by July, we said, okay, we need to start to renew the sales goal and look again into the future. And that a lot of that discussion was driven by fear, a lot of still leeriness or weariness about setting things up. But now as we move into September, they really are back in a space of, okay, we've got some confidence back and we really need to make some consideration again for what we can do for the rest of the year. And I cautioned them and I said, they came back, their first answer was, well, we need to reduce our sales goal. But I think with every organization, I always say, or do we challenge ourselves to bring it back? And what I mean by that is the second you start to set a precedent within your organization that, hey, if we're not going to hit the goal, we'll just sort of back it off, right? It's dangerous to be able to do that. We're now at a point in the year in September that to be able to look and try and make up an entire year or maybe the 6 months that might be lost in revenue, to make it up in the 3 months does become challenging. So maybe you stretch that into 2021 to try and raise that level and bring back your initial sales goal over the course of what remains in 2020 and into 2021. But I do love the idea that you have to maintain like, no, we're not just going to give in. We're going to come back and figure out how to achieve our goal still. I like this graphic of just this idea that everybody in the organization, if they're tracking it day to day, and I've done this with a number of clients where one of them has to make up $800,000 between now and the end of the year. Last week, we figured out where we could pick up 240,000 of that 800, but it's because every single day we're looking at the goal of recovering our sales performance. I think one of the things any sales trainer would look at is activity is the leading indicator of future sales potential. And I will tell you that for the first part of the year, certainly through COVID, activity is down. And it's down in such a way that people are often doing the work, but well, two things. Sometimes the working from home, everything's over Zoom, has created less activity, but also really adapting to figure out how do I generate a level of interest. I'm getting less inbound traffic. I need to be going out to the market. So I use this example because this is what I found is in most organizations, they never actually do the work on this. And what I'm getting at is on the left-hand side, you've got activity. And I just pick these randomly. So you're doing, and this could be a company, it could be an individual salesperson, a sales group. But let's say you're doing, and I know some of these might be outdated, but it's, again, just for example, you do mailers, and on a given week, you're sending out 100 pieces of mail. And that generates, let's say, 4 leads for you. You do cold calls, and you get somebody who's doing 50 calls, and you go through, work through the volume of each one of these activities. Maybe your networking event is online now, posting on social media, maybe doing AdWords where you pick up 1,000 impressions a month. But let's say you know that you've got to be able to generate 5 leads to be able to get a sale. And you know that oftentimes what I find is individual salespeople and sales teams don't work this to say, from our activity, how many leads are we actually generating? And then to be able to say, okay, well, if we're trying to generate, let's say 6 sales a month at 17 leads at a conversion rate of 1 in 3, we're only, we're getting 5, and we need a lot more than that. And so what I've always said is, okay, well, let's go through and figure out what increase we actually have to have in each individual activity. So moving from 100 mail pieces to a 25% increase, 125. Move from 50 calls to 75 calls. I mean, that really works out to be about 1 extra call for every business day of the month. And you work through all of these things. And what that does is then it gives me the opportunity to say, well, my new number of leads I generate in a month is 30 leads. And so effectively what it's done is just doubled the number of leads and doubled the number of, if I know my conversion rate, to what, whether I'm hitting my goal. So in this case, if I figured if I close 1 in 5, I now have 6 sales instead of 3 sales in the first numbers. So I think that's so important that an individual salesperson or anybody in sales is able to track this. A sales manager should know this about their entire side of the organization, and an owner should know this as well. The reason for this is not only does it help anybody in sales self-manage and understand that, oh, as I do more of this, I get more result. Constantly, obviously, trying to improve quality with each of these things. I encourage you to do that as an exercise with your organization. But the other thing is that it allows me to then start to really measure my cash flow calendar as an organization. I can then start to see, well, what are my weighted sales projections and roll all those numbers up to really be able to see what I have. And then to be able to look at even total pipeline value. That I found that in 2020, all of these things are critical on the selling side and getting in front of your clients to be able to know just how much more work you need to do to hit your numbers. So now I go back to how do you reach people on a more consistent basis? And let's dive into some of those tactics. I got to tell you, the first thing I look at is sales time. And this may seem like the most ridiculous thing, but as more and more people are working from home, more and more doing work over Zoom, as businesses maybe changed and is a little more chaotic, that one of the things I'm finding is that sales organizations, salespeople, and other just generally people in sales really don't have a calendar set where they have die-hard sales time. And this is true of anybody. I'll give you an example of how I normally set this up with people. I say you need a 2-hour time block. The reason for that is that, you know, your alter ego stupid inevitably likes to waste the first 30 minutes of any sales time refilling your coffee, checking your email, that sort of thing. So with 2 hours, even after stupid wastes 30 minutes, I've got an hour and a half left. I oftentimes say, get away from your desk. If you're working from home, find somewhere else to work. If you're working from the office, get away from your desk. It's not a productive place, but get to a place where you really can focus. Tell others, hey, I'm selling right now, and mark it off in your calendar. I have a client who's actually just started doing this and blocking big segments in his business or in his calendar. He is in the software business and has said, I've been able to reach more people in the first 2 weeks with just dedicating time. And somehow by blocking in my calendar, the rest of my organization has just worked around those time blocks. The thing I also like is making a team time. If you've got a couple of people to be able to say, hey, Thursday mornings from 9 till 11, let's all just dive into this. I have been using this with a receptionist at a business where she is reaching out to existing clients and also past clients to re-invite them or re-engage them. But dealing with this with sales guys, this is a great function for owners where sometimes they have the ability to strengthen strategic alliances to reach out to distributors on an international level, that sometimes the voice of the owner is so powerful, but you've got to set time aside. And again, using inside sales as a group to be able to say, okay, well, if we've got spare time, let's block some of this time to really make dedicated calls out. People have sort of said to me, well, who do you start with? And, you know, as you come back to doing business on a more regular basis, where do we start? I start with clients. I always start with clients because there's always work within any company's database. There's always more sales. The first thing I've been doing is saying, hey, let people know you're open for business. Invite them back, let them know that you're valuable. We want to do more business with you. And it's funny how clients have often gone really, really quiet. And as they're trying to manage in their own business or manage their own life, that they need to be reminded that you're there. And so I think there's nothing better than to be inviting them back, getting in front of them. I found with clients that now all of a sudden we maybe need to change our packaging. We need to be able to bundle things. We need to upsell or downsell, a new program, a new product mix. I found that that there has to be something that is new and interesting to bring customers back. If you are selling your product with the same pricing model, the same functionality, that oftentimes they need something that sort of spurs their interest. One of the things I'm finding is really, really helpful right now is a guarantee. That again, it reduces risk for people. Oftentimes, my experience in doing a guarantee was a money-back guarantee for a year of using the product. At the time, we were really worried about being able to do that, but over the course of the year, we gave back one product license. It amounted to half of what they'd actually paid. So we gave back about $580 on a small sale. It helped us generate about I think the number was $286,000 in new sales, just specifically that we could tie to the guarantee. So that was pretty good ROI, and we continued to use that years afterwards. I have a client that has just moved from about a $3,600 payment price. That price point has become a concern, and they just implemented a, hey, pay over 12 months program, and immediately have picked up sales. The other thing I want to touch on is this word care, customer care. I think the critical thing right now is reaching out to people by Zoom, FaceTime, phone, but actually making human contact with people. I'm so tired of corporate emails going out, talking about things from a corporate perspective. I'd much rather get a video from the president of a company that gives me an update on what they're doing, but I want to get back to personalized. I want to get back to every one of my customers and say, how are you? How has 2020 been going for you? How can we help? I have a friend who isn't a VAR and isn't necessarily in our space. He's in safety. But he said, what do I do? I mean, safety training has just dried up. Safety has completely dried up for me as an industry. I said, have your customers given up on safety? He deals with everything from mining to oil and gas. And he said, well, no, they're all obviously doing it. I said, I want you to just phone every one of your clients. I said, in fact, start with the top 100 list. Pick the 100 people you think are a good opportunity and just phone them and say, how are you? How can we help? What is, safety looking like for you in 2020? The conversations he's had have been unbelievable. And in the first week, he set, I think it was 6 sales meetings in the first week. Subsequently, he set up another 14. So he set up 20 meetings in about a 3-week period, starting from ground zero, just by being able to come back to people that were in his network, customers and prospective customers in his network, and asking these questions. How are you? How can we help? What's 2020 look like? Tell me a little bit about your business. And it's been really powerful. My coach said to me, how many people are in your entire database back in March? I said about, 880 people. He said, have you called your entire database yet? I said, are you crazy? He said, there's never been a more important time to personally reach out and touch base with every single one of those people, not by something impersonal like email, but by a Zoom call, a phone call. Be a human, reach out to them. And I will tell you, as daunting as that sounds, it is unbelievably effective. I think when we look at the marketplace and think about our prospects that we had going through the year, it's sort of time to, as this microwave shows, time to reheat things. And what I mean by reheat is a lot of people may have gone away and we need to get back to engaging them. And I would tell you, re-educating them. So one of my experiences in the software business was all of my clients were in the US and I was in Canada years ago. And so the only way I could really reach people was by phone. And so I constantly had to be reaching out and sort of re-warming them. I was re-educating clients. I was updating them on functionality. I was going through a lot of this list. I was constantly, almost on a bi-weekly basis with my prospects, being able to try and find something that was new and interesting about my product, a new pricing deal we had to bring them in, an added value, some sort of bundle we were going to do, added seats, new programs, something that we were doing around training, around our loyalty, around the guarantee we had, the warranty work, time-sensitive things we had. Again, functionality, and there's only so many new functions and features you can bring out at any given time. So you're constantly having to think, with my prospective customers, what can I tell them that's interesting? What market studies, in terms of re-educating them, where is their market information that is a trend that I can point to that shows I'm a thought leader? We do sometimes, we've got price sensitive stuff so that we created a little bit of urgency with people. And then the last thing is, even we went as far as to be able to try gifts with purchases. We had it with a client once before where we had a BMW driving school with a purchase of a certain value. And they moved, I think it was 12 sales. The average value was about $58,000 if my numbers are right. But you bought $58,000 and then you got a single seat or a single opportunity to go to this driving school. Worked unbelievably well. I think right now, one of the big things is don't give up. And I want to come back over a couple of stats. People are, the reason I say don't give up now, and I should touch on this. People are busy. People are busy sort of surviving 2020. They're busy with family, trying to figure out how to get kids back to school. They're busy with so many things that are more important at the moment than your product or service. And so we have to come back to say, okay, I'm going to have to be persistent and stay in front of them for a longer period of time. And so I use a couple of stats I found really interesting that I pulled off a 2019 study. 92% of sales still involve the phone. If you are not getting on the phone, getting in front of people live over Zoom, you are not doing it. I spoke to a guy today who said, well, if we send them to the website, then the website can help generate that sale. And I laughed. I said, unless you're, an Amazon or a product that is, something really, really simple and basic with no risk, $8 price tag, you are not doing that. You need to get on the phone with people and get in front of them and tell them about you, tell them about your product, your company. The average is actually, I thought this number used to be 6 or 7. The average is 8 attempts to reach a prospect. And email is almost 40 times more effective than Facebook, Twitter. So next time somebody says, well, let's get on social media, go back to things the phone and email being much more effective. And then the last thing I'd mention is, are they really prospects? And what I mean by that is we oftentimes have stale people that we keep going back to. We need to get honest about our pipelines and who really might potentially buy from us. One of the things I love right now is, what's your story? there has to be a compelling story about you, your product, your business. Like, what is compelling about you right now that pulls me back in? Knowing I'm busy just trying to run my business. I'm busy with my family. I'm busy with my life in 2020. You have to be able to tell me why now is a good time, why your solution, why you are the ones, and why it has to be here, right? So I've got to get back to this idea of, I would ask you, what is compelling about your 2020 story? Let me ask you, how do you sell over Zoom in 2020? I think this is one of the most popular questions people have. I think it's certainly challenging. I spend a dramatic amount of time, probably 20 hours a week on Zoom. And I go back to this, that if I want to be interested in Zoom, you want to keep me engaged. It's sort of like if you go back to a junior high or high school science class, and then they said, hey, we're going to do a movie. You inevitably were a lot more interested in a movie than you were, or a film, than you were in what the teacher was saying at the front of the class. So I say, hey, what are you going to show me today? What are you going to demo? What makes this interesting? And it really does, you got to think of it from an entertainment perspective now. You've got to be like, it can't be just you sitting in front of a screen. Even if you put up the tropical background behind you, it's not enough. It has to become interesting. And I'll give you a couple of examples. Trout River Industries. These are guys that build trailers. They ship them all over the world. They have a live bottom trailer so that it's got a conveyor belt on the bottom to get everything out of the trailer without having to tip it over. They have built out an entire, I guess I'd call it a showroom, where they literally have the sales guy who can now walk around with a cameraman and he demos the product. He has a live interview over Zoom, and he is effectively in a virtual showroom globally. It has reduced their travel costs by over 80%, and they in fact have increased more sales and said they will never go back. I think it is one of the most, I mean, it was big money when they said we're laying out, you can imagine how big a tractor trailer is. They've got a couple of those in a showroom. So the showroom is huge, but they spent all that money because they said we have to adapt and transition to how we demonstrate our product over this product or over Zoom. I use a friend of mine, Kevin Burns. Kevin has built out, he recognized after trying to do training and do a lot of work on selling over Zoom that it wasn't sufficient. Some of his background is radio and television. So he said in television, you know, when you look at the news show that comes on, the 6 o'clock news comes on, and he went, there's the anchor desk, then it throws to the weatherman, then it throws to the sports guy. He said, I've got to build that out. So he has built out a little in-home studio, and this could be in your office or home, where he's got his one-on-one desk. Then he's able to transition to a separate camera, and he just toggles with his hand, just a remote, the other camera. He now stands in front of his whiteboard and can do a demonstration there. He has the ability to save screens and email them to people right away. He has built out a live training center using Zoom. The last one, if anybody's aware, Tony Robbins just did Unleash the Power Within virtual, where Tony worked with Zoom to figure out how he could create a stadium technology so he could see all the people around the world, about 37,000, on his training. It's exactly the same technology you're seeing with the NBA playoffs, with a lot of professional sports teams, where they're trying to demonstrate and show the crowd virtually in the stadiums and in the arenas. And so I just bring it back to, how are you entertaining me and making this edutainment, right? Education for me, entertainment for me. I think that's powerful. A platform that's totally underutilized right now is LinkedIn. And I specifically say that people respond to personal messages, reaching out. My brother has done a great job of building a global network of distributors for his product, a sports apparel product out of Australia, simply using LinkedIn. People respond to personal messages. He said, and sometimes he responds, messages them 2 and 3 times. Oftentimes on the second and third is when they actually respond. He never pitches in the first message. That's always a failure. I love the idea of offering value to them without any sort of strings attached. This seems to be a big thing. So what can I do with your product or service right out of the gate? I found that LinkedIn is absolutely awesome, and it really does, though, become a test and measure of scripting it, testing it, seeing what responds to. But man, there's nothing better than trying to reach people all over the world and all over the continent using LinkedIn as a platform. The last couple places I touch on to be able to focus are probably on where you can get multiple sales versus single transactions. I think so often we look at a one-time purchase, and this is, I mean, any sales organization is conditioned this way. I had a client where just by starting to ask clients what their purchase plans were for an entire year, so to be able to say now, hey, what are your purchase plans for 2021, instead of just looking for that next license sale, that a lot of times people have been able to say, oh, well, we have a plan into the future, that it changes the conversation and can generate a lot more in immediate sales. I look at alliance partners. I think the comment I would make there is alliance partners are good in name, but you really have to work those relationships. I always presume that 100% of an alliance is my responsibility. And this could be a retailer across the street. It can be another VAR in a different country. I mean, there's so many different levels there. But I do look at, my experience has been, if I go after 10 alliance partners, 5 of them will sign up and 2 of them will be effective. So that's sort of the math I typically use. If I really want to get 2 effective ones, I've got to approach at least 10 in a serious way. And again, I go back to this idea of in 2020, you have to be able to just make an offer. How can your product or service, how can you help the end client right now in their business? The last thing I touch on, and I won't spend much time on this because I know where we're at in terms of overall time, but I go back to clients and say, hey, have you got enough leads? Whenever the answer is no, the other thing I have to do outside of connecting with people is also an indication that I have a lack of marketing. And so you've got to be able, in this fall, to be able to ramp that up in your business. And by marketing, I'm a big fan of AdWords campaigns, that people are searching for your solution all the time. If you don't have somebody running an effective AdWords campaign, you're missing out. Website SEO, remarketing to your website. Again, I'm a big fan of digital marketing first. Marketing to your database. I talk to companies all the time that have thousands of people in their database and are not consistently engaging them. They reach out quarterly or sometimes not at all. We have been able to pick up 30% increases in sales for clients just by becoming effective at database marketing. An active referral program. Google reviews, if you're more retail focused, absolutely gold. A friend of mine has a business where they give away a big screen TV every month for Google reviews because it's become his #1 way to generate leads. I mentioned alliances, LinkedIn. Advertorials, I never like advertising, but where I can write a story about my business or my product and be able to promote that. Social is way down my list. And then finally, advertising, because it's expensive. But there's so many ideas there. We could talk just about that. The last thing I want to talk about, I'll leave with this, is consistency and persistence. Those are my favorite sales words, that anything you do now has to be just that consistent effort. And I love just some of these stats, and I'll give you a second to just read through some of these. 48% of salespeople never follow up. 25% of salespeople make a second contact and stop. And as you work through that, this is the National Sales Executive Association from a couple of years ago. 80% of sales are made on the 5th to 12th contact. That last point, consistency and persistence is it. And it's going to be your approach to, and I come back to my words, authentic connection with people, effectiveness, and just really, really connecting. 80% of those sales are going to be through your persistence and consistency through this fall season. So I hope that's been valuable. If anybody wants to reach out to me, you can do so through my website. If you're interested in my book, I've got a book website, tigerbythetail.com, and I'm glad to talk to anybody about the strategy in their business at any given time. So, but I really thank you for the opportunity to present today.
Marty, thank you very much. If this was a live presentation, I would say a round of applause for Marty, but let's do it in a virtual setting. Find the chat function and type in clap, if you will, please, so we can give Marty a round of applause. So, because Marty did a great job. Thank you really very much, Marty. We really appreciate you sharing that information with us today. So now we're going to open up the roundtable portion of today's session. I see we're starting to get some claps in, so thank you very much. And so in order to do that, let's start it off. First, again, just a reminder that this is going to be our open forum information sharing. The views and the opinions expressed during this roundtable are those of the participants and don't necessarily reflect the official policy or position of the RSPA. Also, we've asked everyone on today's call to avoid sales pitches and to identify themselves when they speak for the benefit of our listeners. And so if you would like to speak, what we would ask you to do is in that chat function, just if you could type in your question, or just say, I would like to speak, or I have something to share. We'd love to get a roundtable discussion going here. And to start us off, we have a featured guest today here at our roundtable, representing Partner Tech, it's Gary Stant. Gary, can you please lead us off our discussion?
Yeah, Jim, thank you for inviting us to this. And Marty, honestly, I've been going to these for probably 10 years, and this is the best presentation I've ever seen. Most people come in and just kind of give you just numbers and different pieces. I know you did a little bit of that at the end, but you kind of told us how to get past COVID, customer care, everything in that side, and even just like you kind of give us a plan on, I think, how we need to get through this. And I think one of the best things, I mean, there was many, many great things, but it's also kind of like, don't give up. There's so many things. And, you know, we're in a era, I guess, or a year that, you know, nobody's ever went through this before, and nobody knows when it's going to end. And, you know, persistence is definitely going to basically get us through this and the side. But there were so many great ideas. I love the thing with the sales by the day, because again, I know lots of times I talk to my team and I go, you know, how are we doing this month? And it's like, well, I don't know if I'm going to hit my numbers or not. And you know, like if you have like a daily, a weekly, and a monthly goal, it definitely kind of keeps you on pace, keeps you focused all the way through. I love the Zoom piece of it, you know, where you're going to basically, you know, keep everybody entertained as they're going through that. And, you know, like the customer care part of it, where you were going through and, you know, taking people there and making them, you know, kind of repackage some of your products and to come through with something that's basically going to get us past this COVID side of it, and you know, and how you're going to go through it. And I love the guarantees, and literally everything through the presentation was very, very good. And thank you very much.
Thanks, Gary. I appreciate the idea that some of this feels like the rest of the year and into 2021 is going to feel a little bit like throwing spaghetti at the wall. And what I mean by that is, you know, there's so many ideas I throw out, but it is sort of an ongoing adapting, innovating, and figuring out what seems to compel people. If you try something and it's not compelling, then go on to the next thing. And it really, I think sales is one of the toughest roles to be in to begin with. And so persistence and consistency really is, you got to have a thick skin. But certainly, yeah, in 2020, that's never been truer.
I agree 100%.
Great, thank you guys. Now we'll turn it over to the audience. And again, if anybody wants to weigh in, just drop us a note in the chat function and we'll be happy to unmute you. And any question that you have for Marty, or any observation that you have about how you've been adapting sales and effectively communicating with your merchants during the new normal. Again, everybody got to be exposed to that chat function when we asked you to clap, so please feel free to give us the heads up there. We have had some questions come in, and so Marty, I'll toss this one to you. Have you seen SMBs using social media effectively to generate sales during COVID-19? You had that far down on your list that you shared, or are phone calls and emails still much more effective, and is that where we should invest our time? So I guess what's your take on social media, Marty?
So I think social media almost becomes like a verifier. You know that you've got a presence there. I can see some of your stuff, particularly if you've got a product that's pretty visual. But what I found is that we're measuring. In fact, I had this conversation with a client this morning. He said, we're going to abandon all of our stuff on Instagram and Facebook. And I said, why? And he said, well, we're not generating any business out of it. He goes, we're getting all sorts of likes and we're getting engagement. And I said, and I think that's the big distinction. On social media, we're always talking about engagement, but I don't like that word, because you know, you measure it, this many people liked something or hearted it or so-called engaged. But to me, that is a level of engagement that's about a 1 on a scale of 100 versus going back to an email. I know somebody responded. I've got a client who actually uses a product called, I think it's Email Butler, and he's able to measure when people open it, how many times they've looked at it, and it's sort of a bit of like a cloaking or a mechanism where he can just measure everything about email. But when I get on the phone with, you know, Jim, if I get on the phone with you, we have an engaging conversation. I might say, well, even at a bad conversation, it was a 5 out of 10. And I think comparing that to the engagement level in social is so far down the line to actually generate sales that I'm more and more, and I have tried online funnels. I have run social campaigns I've just never found it to be as effective to engage people and move them closer to a sale. So I guess that's my answer.
Got it. Great. Thank you very much. We also had a question came in. It's more of a logistical one. Are we able to get a copy of your presentation to share with our sales team? So we are going to send out a recording afterwards. And Marty, just want to see if it's okay. You are right if we share the slide deck with our members as well so they can pass along to their sales team.
Of course, yeah. And as a follow-up, if somebody's sales team needs a little bit of input, glad to help with that.
Fantastic. Wonderful. All right. Again, if you have questions, use a question function, use a chat function. We're happy to get any of those to try to make this as much of a roundtable as possible. So another question we have to get to says we want to sell more wireless technology because it can help our merchants. What's a good way to introduce that without sounding pushy or opportunistic? And I guess, Marty, just to give you a little background from our industry standpoint, you might know this already, but you know, with folks in a COVID standpoint, they want to have less contact. Merchants want to have less contact, physical contact with their customers. And so
Right.
This is asking about, okay, we want to sell them untethered stuff, but how do we do that without sounding like we're taking advantage of the entire COVID crisis?
Well, I think you have to come at it from, I mean, there's some element of, if you're just being salesy, or if you're being honest. And what I get, and what I'm saying is, in building out that story, there's an authentic story there that, hey, people are concerned about their safety. And, as merchants, you're concerned about your clients. And so from sort of those statements, you can then transition to say, so our solution to that has been moving to wireless. And so I think instead of letting people determine why you're doing that and presume that it's sort of you're just trying to get more sales, I think you have to set it up for them to recognize, here's what we're seeing in the marketplace. Here's what people are asking for. Safety is super high on that list. And so you present your solution as being, this is our response to that. And here's how it helps meet those concerns of people being cautious, people not wanting to have contact. So it's a legitimate, right? But you've got to approach it and be able to say, when you read that, whether it's in an email or a script that you're going to use on the phone, to just be like, is this honestly how we're approaching it? Is this true? Is it going to ring true to our merchants that they're going to say, yeah, that's exactly what I'm experiencing day to day as customers come in? So I think it's just authentic storytelling to set it up, and then that leads to your solution being the answer.
So you're saying authentic, sincere problem solving, looking at the situation from the viewpoint of your merchant. You're saying that's going to make it seem less salesy, less pushy. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right, Jim. And I guess what I mean is, there is a situation that I think we can all agree on, that a lot of merchants are dealing with that. And so we can present that. Now, if you were making that up, right? If people didn't really have safety concerns, if they really weren't being that cautious, if merchants weren't really, then I can tell you it's going to be a bit of a fail, because you haven't found that authentic issue for them, or that authentic story. So I think that's if that's a legitimate concern. So go with that and use that, and just say, that drives our solution, and here it is.
Great, thank you. We have time for maybe one or two more questions. If you want to squeeze that in here at the end, feel free to do that. And again, Marty shared his contact information. We'll be sending the slide deck so you can reach out to him one-on-one. Here's a question. It says, we want to be persistent but not annoying. Going to sound like when I was pursuing my wife before we were married and dating. So we want to be persistent but not annoying. How do you recommend we send follow-up emails to prospects who don't respond?
I think if we sent an email that said free money, people would be responding left, right, and center. And it points to the idea that free money as an email would have value to people. If people aren't responding to your email or to just follow up, it's because we haven't tapped into what might be valuable to them. So I always look to say, let's put ourselves in our merchants' shoes and be able to say, what are they experiencing that we can help with? Again, thinking of my brother, he had done a whole campaign where he offered to be able to say, listen, I've organized a training program for you guys. It is nothing related to our product, but I thought it would be really valuable to help you in this time of need, to be able to say, and in his case, it was related to helping them generate sales as retailers. And so, but he said, well, I've got to do something to get in front of him. But that created enough value that he got overwhelming response, a lot from people who hadn't responded to him previously. So if you aren't getting responses, keep adding value. And I think you can make an offer to somebody on a weekly basis. Somebody had a great line for me today that said, Seth Godin hits my inbox with an email every single day, and I'm never frustrated by it. And it's because Seth Godin's blogs every day are trying to create value for his readers.
No, that's a great point. It's almost you can reach out to somebody with impunity if you are consistently providing value to them. Is that essentially what you're saying, Marty?
Absolutely, Jim.
Yeah, good. Focus on the value. Well, we are out of time for today's Canadian Community Roundtable. How about another virtual round of applause for Marty Park? Marty, thank you so much for sharing your insights and sharing your wisdom with us today. Again, this will be available on demand for you to share with your team, the recording, and also we'll send you a copy of the slide deck as well in PDF, so you're able to share that. So thanks, Marty, for making today possible, and thanks also to the RSPA community sponsors for today. We really appreciate it. And also, if you want to become an RSPA member, or if you're currently a member and you want to get more engaged, feel free to reach out to us at membership@gorspa.org. Our members, our community are the value. They are the value of the organization, and so we'll be sure to respond to any message that you reach out to us. As John said, if it's important to you, it's important to us, and we're happy to help any way that we can. So again, thanks very much, everybody, for attending and participating today. Thanks, Marty Clark, for speaking, and have a tremendous rest of your day. Goodbye, everybody.